special video about yarn fiction. So I have always loved to read, and when I first got really into yarn, I was a crocheter first. I looked for books about crochet, not only pattern books, but just looked to see what fiction books there might be. And so I started with crochet fiction, and then when I started knitting, it grew to knitting fiction. And I have quite a library. Most of the books are books that I have bought and reread over time. And so I have compiled, I've got about 2.5 pages of some notes, not anything too heavy, about the different books that I have read. So I'd love to share them with you today, and maybe you will find something that you might be interested in. Right now it is very hot and warm here in Nebraska, and so sometimes sitting in the cool house with a nice glass of lemonade and a book for a little while, that sounds pretty nice. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So the first two series I'm going to share with you are by Betty Hechtman, and I've got some of my books here. So Betty Hechtman, the first one in the series, Hooked on Murder. And I should say I love the titles of most of these books, especially this first genre of books, which is the cozy mystery books. And I should say there are cozy mysteries in the bookstore on many different topics. So if you like coffee, there are cozy coffee mysteries. If you like cross stitch, you might find cozy cross stitch mysteries. Well, I happened to like crochet when I first started really getting back into it, which was back when my daughter was quite little. And so I looked for books on crochet. So this series of books by Betty Hechtman is a crochet mystery, and let's see, it first came out in 2008. It is a 15-book series. I'll just share some of the titles. So Hooked on Murder, Dead Men Don't Crochet, A Stitch in Crime, and By Hook or Crook. So some clever, cute titles to these books. So the premise of this book, the main character, Molly Pink, is a bookstore event planner or coordinator, and it takes place in Tarzana, California. She has a best friend, Dinah, and then there is a very colorful character in the bookstore where Molly works, who's very, very into crochet, who wears a lot of her colorful crochet things, but she's maybe a little bit annoying to Molly. So those two get into some little squabbles and stuff, so it's kind of fun. But 15 fun books to choose from. And when I say, sorry, I must have some yarn fuzz floating around here. And they are mysteries. There's always a murder in here, but it's never gruesome. I could not do gruesome or gory. So it's fairly tame, I will say that. So always good stories. They always keep me guessing until the end. I really liked this series because it was about crochet, and a crochet group called the Tarzana Hookers that meet at the bookstore. And all of these characters get in to help Molly as she solves different murders throughout the series. So really fun book. I liked the setting of the bookstore. So that is Betty Hechtman, A Crochet Mystery. And each of these books come with a recipe and crochet pattern in the back. And you will find that with several of these cozy mysteries that they do include at least a pattern. But for example, in Dead Men Don't Crochet, there is a pattern for a Hugs of Comfort shawl. And then there is a recipe for Molly's cheesecake cupcakes. Sounds pretty good. So that's just a little bit about Betty Hechtman's Crochet Mystery Series. And then in 2013, she started writing a new series, still set in California. But this one, I'm just going to move some things out of the way here. This one is her Yarn Retreat Mystery Series. And I have a few of these here. There actually are 10 books in this series. I have not read all of them, but this is the first one, Yarn to Go. And then there's Silence of the Lamb's Wool. So you can see some clever, fun titles. Gone with the Wool. So a play on some very familiar titles to us. This series is about Casey Feldman. She is a dessert chef, and her deceased aunt had a yarn retreat business, and Casey goes to help kind of settle things with her aunt's estate, and then finds out that there is a yarn retreat that is coming up, doesn't have time to cancel, and so gets involved with the yarn retreat with help from her friend. You know, there's always kind of a nice sidekick. And at this point, Casey had not known how to knit or crochet, so she kind of gets thrown into this whole yarn retreat thing. But over the course of the yarn retreat, she does learn, and she solves kind of the mysterious death of her aunt. And there's quite a bit that goes on over the course of the weekend yarn retreat in the first book. So a very fun series. I just recently listened to this book through my Libby app. So you may find this one available to listen to. I don't know if there were any other ones, but I know I re-listened to this again, and it was really fun. I will say I have read some of these books several times, and it's always amazing to me that I don't always remember who the guilty party is or who the murderer is. So it always keeps me guessing. And I suppose it's because I've read so many of these that I probably can't keep them straight, but it's really fun to revisit these. And it's really enjoyable. So in these books, you know, they do talk about yarn, they talk about people's projects that they're working on. It's just a lot of fun. So that is Betty Hechtman again, the Yarn Retreat Mystery. All right, moving on into another cozy mystery. This series is by Maggie Sefton. And if you follow Knitty Natty on YouTube, she just did a video about visiting a yarn store in Colorado. And this is actually set in Fort Collins, Colorado. The series of this book is based on the actual yarn store Lambspun, and the author Maggie Sefton was a knitter who learned in the store. I just gotta change gears here. So I have quite a bit of these, and again, these aren't all of them. I didn't bring all of my books off the shelf, but I brought enough of them in here. So actually, the owner of the yarn store in the book is based on, so the character in the book, the owner of the yarn store, Mimi, is based on the actual yarn store owner of Lambspun in Fort Collins, Colorado. So that is the backdrop, Fort Collins, Colorado. This is a 16-book series. And the main character is Kelly Flynn. She is an accountant from DC who goes to Fort Collins for her aunt's funeral. And the setting is the yarn store is in a Spanish colonial farmhouse. There is a cafe with that. Actually, there is in real life too. I would encourage you to watch that video by Knitty Natty. I would say the characters in here are, at least when the series starts, they're in their 20s. So I think it appeals to, you know, younger maybe younger readers now. I started reading these quite a while ago. But let me just share a few of the titles. I really like these titles. Needled to Death. And let's see. Knit One, Kill Two. Dropped Dead Stitch. I'll just share this one. This is pretty funny. Fleece Navidad. So these titles I absolutely love in these books. These also include recipes and a knitting pattern in here. So Kelly, yes, Kelly, trying to keep my character straight. Kelly comes in. There were actually some mysterious circumstances around her aunt's death. She ends up solving that, and she does end up staying in the Fort Collins area. And there's a whole host of friends and characters that go along with this series. Let's just take a look. Dropped Dead Stitch. Let's see what we have for the recipe and the pattern. This is Jennifer's Afghan in here. And then recipes, we have Nancy's Butternut Squash Soup and Diane's Famous Chocolate Chip Cookies. So mostly the patterns do kind of go along, the patterns, knitting or crochet patterns do kind of go along with what's going on in the book. So you really could immerse yourself in there. And sometimes the recipes do, maybe always, maybe the recipes do too. So you really could immerse yourself into these books. This one in particular, the Maggie Sefton, you know, very good at the description of the yarn store and the yarns in there and the whole experience of being in the yarn store. So I think that's a lot of fun. And there are, if I didn't say this already, there are 16 books in that series. And again, I would encourage you to check out Knitty Natty's video about this, and you can actually see an in-person video with the yarn store owner of Lambspun. All right, the next series is by Sally Goldenbaum, and I need to rearrange and find where they are. So hold on one moment. All right, I am back. This was definitely challenging. I've got my notes in my book series, and I've tried to make different stacks of books so I could easily grab them as I'm talking about them. So Sally Goldenbaum, I will say this is my favorite series. So this one, for me, I discovered this one actually because my husband Jeff knows how much I, had loved yarn fiction, and he found one, and I can't remember which one it was now. It may have been this one, great name, Angora Alibi, and it has a sailboat on it, and it has yarn. Well, if you've been with me for a while, you know that we sail, and of course I love yarn, and so I thought, oh, that would be good. And so I started reading this book, but then I'm like, there's a lot of characters in here that, these names just keep coming and coming, and these characters seem already really developed, and I don't know who they are. So after starting to read it, I'm like, I think we might be in the middle of a series. And so I did discover that he bought one, well down the road from the first one. So I started, I think I ordered the first couple off of Amazon. And so the first one is Death by Cashmere. And this cozy mystery series is called A Seaside Knitter's Mystery. So you will see sailboats in lots of these. Just share some of these covers. So this is set in Sea Harbor, Massachusetts. It's a quiet fishing village and a very touristy town during the summer. And it features 4 main characters, Izzy, Nell, Birdie, and Cass. Izzy is a former lawyer who wanted to step down from corporate life, and so she opened a yarn store in this area where her aunt and uncle live. Nell is her aunt, and then Birdie is the town beloved matriarch, so very elderly woman but loved by everyone. And then Cass is a owner, or her family owns a lobster company, and so she is a fisherwoman or a lobster woman by trade. Well, these four characters come together, and Izzy, Nell, and Birdie already know how to knit, and they kind of bring Cass along. But it's I believe every Thursday evening in Izzy's shop, they bring a dinner, and then they talk and they knit, and they have fantastic food. So this book series for me is the most descriptive with yarn, the most descriptive with the foods they eat. I just love how that group of four women meets. It's just a very special and precious friendship. And I feel like I have a very special group of friends in my in-person knitting group. We've been together since 2013, and those ladies are dear to me. And I feel like we have a close bond, just like the ladies in these series. But all of the murders are set against the backdrop of this town, and they all work together. There's a lot of murders that happen in each of these books, in each of the murder series. And this sleepy fishing village, lots of murders take place, but these four always seem to finally solve it. They talk about unraveling the threads and following the stitches where they go. So the description is really nice. I have shared this series of books with another knitting friend, and she really enjoyed it too. Let's see. There are knitting patterns in each of the books. So no recipes, I don't believe, but knitting patterns. So in the first one, Death by Cashmere, the knitting pattern in there is Nell's Sea Silk Scarf. Sea Silk Scarf. So Death by Cashmere, let's just look at a couple of the titles. Moon Spinners, A Holiday Yarn. I like this one, Murder in Merino. So those are my favorite series, and I think I like those probably now, especially because I feel like I'm probably closest in age to Nell. So I feel like it's not necessarily all about the younger people. But it's more people kind of around my age, and I appreciate that. Although Izzy, is young, and Cass is young, but then you have some older women featured in here too, which I really, really enjoy. So that is Sally Goldenbaum, A Seaside Knitter's Mystery. There are 18 books in that series, if I didn't say. Somewhere along the line, it went through 1 through something, and then the numbering sequence got off. But if you visit her website, which I'm going to have links to all of these things, you'll find the whole complete list of books. So glad to share that one with you. And so many of these books were gifts to me from Jeff. That's, once I got hooked on a series, that was great birthday gifts or Christmas gifts. So very fun. Another one, and I'm going to change gears here. Here we go. This one is quite an unusual knitting murder mystery, at least to me. This one also has a little a ghost in here. So this is A Haunted Yarn Shop Mystery by Molly MacRae, and I am actually rereading this one again. I wasn't really sure if I liked this one a whole lot, but I am rereading it, and I'm actually really enjoying it. The main character is Kath Rutledge, and she inherits her grandmother's wool shop. And then there is a ghost, Geneva. And I think Kath is the only one that can see her and hear her. So I think at the time, I think I was, in my mind, thinking of the ghost Geneva like Moaning Myrtle from Harry Potter. So, but it's kind of a fun series. I mean, they've got anything, you know, lots of different things. I guess, you know, us knitters, there's lots of different hobbies in the world. There's lots of different things we like. So if you like haunted things, maybe this one is for you. So it's a 6-book series. It's set in Tennessee. The first one is Last Wool and Testament. It's kind of fun. Dying Wishes, Spinning in Her Grave. I don't have all 6. I think this one was gifted to me by someone. They discovered it in the bookstore. And that's so fun when somebody knows you, you know, well enough that they know what you like, you know, to try a new book series. So I really appreciate that. Let me see if I can find what pattern is in here in the first one. Well, here is a recipe: rosemary watermelon lemonade and rosemary olive oil cake with dark chocolate. Ooh, the lemonade sounds good right now. And then there is a baby toddler hat. It says Thea's red and white baby toddler hat. So many different types of patterns in these books. So again, you can really immerse yourself in the whole experience and knit a pattern and try recipes related to these books. So these could be really fun, you know, if you have a knitting group, if you all read them, you know, and maybe tried the knitting pattern or tried the recipes. I think that would be really fun. So right now I am rereading Last Wool and Testament. So that is Molly MacRae. The newest cozy mystery series to me was gifted to me by my husband, Jeff, for this past Christmas. And this author was completely new to me. This is Allie Pleiter. And there are 3 books in this series, and I think that may be all there's going to be. And that's unfortunate. You know, I looked at when these were published, and she hasn't had any new ones, you know, in this particular genre that she does. So it is a 3-book series. It's fabulous. Let me see which one is first. Let's see. Okay, I think this one. So On Skein of Death. So Libby is a yarn store owner. So she is, she's divorced, and this yarn store is something that she's doing on her own. She absolutely loves it. So she owns the yarn store. She has a best friend, Molly, who is a baker who has a store across the street. This is her dog, Hank. She has an aging mother who's very forgetful, so that makes for some funny exchanges between Libby and her mom. And there's a old high school boyfriend in the town. There's kind of some chemistry with Libby and her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend. So that's kind of exciting. On Skein of Death, Knit or Die Trying, and this might be my favorite title. It came upon a midnight shear. So the murder may have taken place with a pair of shears in addition to other stuff. But I like this series because I think the murders that Allie Pleiter sets up are so clever and so well thought out, and in some ways a little bit shocking. You know, I still don't think they're as gruesome as things that you see on TV these days. But she's pretty descriptive about these things. And I'll just say that, you know, there are some things related to knitting that are used in these murders. So just very unique. I thought she had a very unique way of describing the murders and just using the knitting for the murders and everything. So I really, really liked this series. I wish there were going to be more, but she kind of left it a little bit open at the end of book 3, but book 3 really kind of tied some things up that were in the background. So I could see it just being a standalone 3-book series, but I really recommend this one. So those are the cozy murder mysteries that I have read. Now we're moving on into some different ones. I have talked about this book before. Let me regroup here. So we're moving on into more, I don't know exactly what I would call this. So no more murders, but more about women's lives and stories and how they're interwoven, and always with the backdrop of knitting. And so the first one is the Friday Night Knitting Club, which I first discovered through my library. Kate Jacobs, Friday Night Knitting Club. And this is a 3-book series. So Friday Night Knitting Club, Knit 2, and then the third one, Knit the Season. So this is a series that I have reread many times. It is about Georgia, a single mom in New York City. She's balancing the yarn store and raising her daughter, a strong-willed young woman. And so the story is about, you know, her owning the yarn store, motherhood, and then the women who come into the yarn store, and somehow they get started with this Friday night tradition of meeting. Georgia's daughter is a amateur baker at this point. She's a young adolescent, and so, you know, she bakes goodies for these ladies, but then all of these ladies kind of come together and their lives get interwoven. Very not super heavy, but there's definitely some sad moments in the books, but it's just this group of women. It talks about their lives, their struggles, their joys. This was a a New York Times bestseller. The following 2 books continue to follow the characters that are really developed in book 1. I will say, you know, with these books now, the characters are much more developed than the characters that you would read about in the Cozy Mystery series, any of the Cozy Mystery series. You know, those are fun characters, but you don't feel like you get really deep into their personality. These books, you definitely get more deeply embedded into these women's lives. And again, it's against the backdrop of a yarn store. And Georgia, the yarn store owner, also knits on commission. And so I thought, you know, that was really fascinating, but a very, very good series. There is a pattern. I don't know if there is in each one, but I was so excited. I think I read this one when I first started knitting. So I finally thought, okay, I'm going to get to knit. I'm going to get to, you know, I can knit now. And so I can read a knitting fiction book. So this one, it also comes with a recipe too. So the pattern in the first book is Darwin's First Scarf. And Darwin is a character in this book who comes into the yarn store. She's a women's study major, and she's definitely an interesting character. Then you have George's daughter, Dakota, her oatmeal, blueberry, and orange muffins. And in addition to the recipe and pattern, there are also discussion questions and a reader's guide in here. So this would be really fun to read for a knitting group or for a women's group and to discuss. So I do love this series. I remember rereading it when our boys were younger and playing baseball. We had lots of travel to baseball games, time between games, waiting for the next games to start. So it was really fun to reread these like every summer for quite a while. I haven't read them in a while, but I would definitely like to read them again. All right, moving right along. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. The Friday Night Knitting Club. I did share this one on the last podcast or two because I have a skein of yarn from Chicken Lady Fiber Arts that is based on this book. So it's called the Friday Night Knitting Club. And just a sneak peek of what is coming up in the next podcast. Quickly, I have a sock or a slipper sock using that yarn that is based on this series. So that was really fun. So if you can even tie your, themed yarn into these books, it makes it just even better. All right, moving on. Let's see. Here we go, back here. The next is a series by Rachael Herron, and it's called A Cypress Hollow Yarn, and it's based on a small California beach town of Cypress Hollow. And this is more of a romantic comedy. There is a 6-book series for this, and I actually have the last 2. I read the first 3 from our library, and sadly they don't carry them anymore. But the first one is Abigail's Shop, and Abigail inherits a cottage from her knitting guru, Eliza Carpenter, and then Eliza's nephew, I believe, inherited something too, and so you have the tension between the woman and the man. And so, some romantic entanglements there. I will say I really enjoyed these. I like, the knitting. The knitting has, a little bit in here, but it's more about the romance. Some more romantic books, but with the backdrop of yarn. And these get pretty spicy too, if you know what I mean. So yeah, spicy romance. So that's just a whole nother genre of knitting books, but a really good series. I would like to reread these again, but I think I'm gonna have to, get them on Amazon because I can't get them from my library anymore. But that is a really, really good series. All right. Now, okay, here we go. Thank you for bearing with me. We are getting through these. All right. I can't talk knitting books without talking about Debbie Macomber, and she has a whole series based on the shop on Blossom Street. And so the first one, this is the first one in the series. And I read it first through my local library, and then I did want to own the book, so I bought it. But the first story, or the first book in the series, shows us the main character, Lydia Hoffman. She is a cancer survivor, and she opens her yarn store kind of as an affirmation of life. And her father, who is deceased, used to own a bicycle shop, and she was really close to her father, and so she knows that he would be really proud of her for doing, something that she loves. Excuse me. She learned to knit when she was in the hospital with cancer. Her sister Margaret is a little bit of a protagonist, kind of very protective older sister maybe thinks that Lydia's dreams are a little too far-fetched and that she's going to fail, but their relationship gets strengthened throughout the course of the book and the series. And Lydia, when she opens her yarn store, she has a yarn class or a knitting class, and then you meet these different women, you know, very different characters who come together to take this knitting class. And again, it delves deeper into the characters. You really get to know and love each of the characters and how their lives get intertwined through the course of knitting together. And then this book, you know, there is a series which continues on, you know, from this first book, and I don't know how many books there are, and they go on. So this shop on Blossom Street, then there's other stores on Blossom Street, but Lydia, this character, does return throughout this series, you know, in some small way, but this first one is really quite good. It's let's see. It talks about 4 very different women brought together by their knitting. And I will say, sorry, I think I'm getting getting a little tired and winded here. The Leisure Arts publication came out with a knit along with Debbie Macomber book series. So this is called The Shop on Blossom Street. And I believe each of the different books had a knitting book, pattern book that went along with it. And so in this first one, I actually found, this says to Kelly, but this is actually a signed copy by Debbie Macomber, which is pretty cool. But it talks about meet the women from the shop on Blossom Street. And there's a picture of, you know, like a yarn store. And then you get little snippets from the book, you know, snippets. You see a little knitting picture there. These shoes belong to the character of Alex Townsend, who's definitely rough around the edges character. So really fun. The patterns in this book kind of go along with what happens in the story. So there is a Baby Blocks book. There's Carol Sunshine. Carol is one of the main characters. Several blankets in this book. Yep, several blankets in this book. So really, really very, very fun. I'll just show you a little bit here. But you can read the book and then really dig in to knitting along with what the different characters are knitting in the book. So I really, really love this series. I have read this book many, many times. I have read all of the books in this series, but I do return to the first, probably the first 2 or 3 books. And then I do happen to have a couple of the other Debbie Macomber like knit books too from this series. So there's one on 20 Wishes. So there are more Afghans, scarf, let's see, pullover sweater. Then this one is based on a turn in the road, and it looks like, I'll just show you that. I know I picked that up at Hobby Lobby. It says 18 portable project inspired by the book. So, and I believe these, you know, these were all pretty accessible yarns. You know, these books are old now, but they used Bernat yarns. They used Lily Sugar and Cream, Universal Yarn, Premier Yarns, Lion Brand yarns. So certainly some things that you could do nowadays. Some really cute cable socks there. So books that you can read, and then you could really have fun knitting patterns from those books. So Debbie Macomber. I'm going to pause a minute because I've dropped my notes. We've got a couple more. Oops. Sorry, I bent down while I was still talking. We've got just a couple more to go. All right. Let's see. Kathleen Fuller, fairly new author for this. This is a Maple Falls romance. This is called Hooked on You. And there's actually 4 books in this series. I've only read the first one, but Arkansas Yarn Company had an exclusive colorway to go along with this book. And with this book, there is also, if you go to the author, Kathleen Fuller's website, she does have patterns, knitting and crochet patterns that go along with each of the 4 books in this series. So this is called, let's see, a Maple Falls romance. So Hooked on You. The main character is Riley. She's from New York City, and she returns to a small town to help out her grandmother in her grandmother's yarn shop because her grandmother broke her leg playing baseball. So you can tell that her grandmother is definitely a spunky character. And there's some romance in here too, so that's a really cute one. But Riley was struggling in New York with her career, and so, coming back to the town, with the grandmother and, people that she knows and loves, really kind of special. So the pattern that goes along with this, I'm just going to give you a quick sneak peek because the yarn, I said Arkansas Yarn Company had yarn that went along with this book. And here is the yarn, and just a quick sneak peek of a project that I'm working on related to this book that I will share in the next podcast. So I have had this for a couple years, I believe. Let's see, 2021, so just a couple years. I have not read the additional books, but I know you can, I believe, still get, I don't know if you can get this one, but I think you can get the other books still on the Arkansas Yarn Company website. And she did have the yarns at the time. She did have like book and yarn combos. I don't think you can get this one anymore, but she may have combos for a couple of the other books. But regardless, you still can get the patterns on Kathleen Fuller's website. So that was just a fun standalone book for me. There are 4 books in the series, but for me, I just read that one. Just really lighthearted. I like the relationship between Riley and her grandmother. So yeah, that was a special book. All right. And then 2 standalone books that I have. And we're going to round this out with 2 standalone books. I will talk about this one first. This is called Casting Off. This is by Nicole R. Dixon. And it says on the cover, a beautiful novel of letting go, healing, and redemption. So the main character, Rebecca Moray, she travels to a tiny island off the west coast of Ireland with her daughter Rowan, which I always just got a kick out of that because I think Rowan yarn. But she travels with her daughter Rowan to do research on a book of Irish knitting. She kind of goes to escape her past. But the book is beautiful with the descriptions of the island, the people that she encounters on this tiny island, the setting, the landscape. It's just beautiful. And, very much drama in this book, which I really enjoyed. Let's see. Her daughter befriends a fisherman and gets involved in his life, an older gentleman. So just a really wonderful cast of characters, some romance in here too. But I really did enjoy this, and I would like to read this one again. So Casting Off. So if you like, something set against the backdrop of Ireland and writing a book on Irish knitting, I mean, that's great. So that was really, really fun to read. Many years ago I read that. And then our last one, The Unlikely Yarn of the Dragon Lady. This is by Sharon J. Mondragon. Well, the O has a little thing over it, so I don't know exactly how to say that. But The Unlikely Yarn of the Dragon Lady. So this book is about a knitting prayer shawl ministry. So if any of you, maybe some of you belong to a church that has a knitting prayer shawl ministry. One of the previous churches that I belonged to did have a knitting prayer shawl ministry, and so I crocheted, and I don't think I knitted any at the time. I was big into crochet, so I crocheted many prayer shawls for that church. So there's a prayer shawl ministry that takes place in this book. A group of ladies, just a couple ladies from the church. And, they're used to knitting in their church, meeting together in the church and doing their prayer shawl ministry and praying for people. Well, the pastor sends the ladies out of the church. There's going to be some work done. And so he sends them out. He wants them to be out of the church and more into the world. And so, these are older ladies, and so they go into a mall, so a local shopping mall, and it really becomes interesting. The characters that they meet in the mall, people who they start praying for at the mall, characters that they wouldn't necessarily have met or even thought about probably. They just encounter some really unusual people at the mall. And there's kind of a crotchety lady who fancies herself the leader of the group, and she's kind of all tough, on the outside. And so it's kind of interesting to see how she manages through all of this upheaval to her knitting ministry, that took place at the church for all these times. And now their pastor is stirring up trouble and making them go out into the mall. So it's really just a really lighthearted, fun book. But if you've ever been a part of a church ministry, a church knitting ministry, or if you ladies groups at churches, it's just a really fun read. All right, I think that brings us to the end. So I have enjoyed sharing my knitting fiction with you all. And I believe this is only, a fraction of what is out there. I plugged in knitting fiction into a Google search, and there is definitely more that comes up. So there are series out there that I am not familiar with and haven't read. There are standalone knitting books, more of the drama, like the Friday Night Knitting Club or the Casting Off. So there certainly are standalone books too that I have not read. So this scratched the surface, but I have a very big library here, which I absolutely love. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this, and I hope I gave you a little taste of what was going on in each of those different types of books. Excuse me a minute. I would love to hear if you have ever read any yarn fiction books, or what one of these that I talked about sounds really interesting to you. And do you have a different one that I didn't mention? I would love to hear about that. So I hope that you are all doing well. I was really excited to sit down today to talk about another thing that I love to do, reading, and it happens to go along with knitting. So it's just, and yarn and crochet. So it was just perfect. So I really enjoyed talking to you about this. And I hope to be back really soon with the next podcast. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.